Hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about my final research project, which is centers on French military involvement in the American Revolution. And I had two questions I wanted to answer. First off, being why did France enter the American Revolution on the side of the Patriots? And second of all, what practical effect did this military aid have? And first, to answer the question of why they entered the war in the first place, that has to be understood in the context of what had been happening in Europe and in North America in the past probably century and a half. So France for the last 2 decades have been the preeminent military power in Europe, um, naval as well as military. James Perkins, in his excellent book France: American Revolution, he talks about how the victory of the British during the 7 Years' War, what we know as the French and Indian War, really left a bad taste in the mouths of the French populace, the common people, and their elites. It really put a dent in their patriotism. They saw Britain as a kind of an upstart, little island in the northwest of Europe that had, really upset the balance of power. This, in their eyes, heretical Protestant, this heretical Protestant nation had toppled the great, glorious Catholic, nation of France and its allies, and it acquired kind of, the top position in Europe. And it had done some humiliating things like put a official overseer in Dunkirk to monitor the French Navy, to make sure they weren't up to, you know, in a funny business, a little bit like what the French did to the Germans actually at the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. This was kind of like a precursor to it, almost just like as the Germans then really took umbrage at all the things, all the humiliations they suffered after that war. The French felt like they suffered a lot of humiliations at the hands of the British, and so they were looking to correct that balance of power, to regain that preeminence in Europe. And so, with the outbreak of the American Revolution, they saw an opportunity to diminish Britain's power, to cut them off from their expanding population source, which could provide millions and millions of men and untold resources and supplies. So as soon as they felt their military ready, they took that opportunity to try to take Britain down a peg. And so they did that in 1778 when Britain declared war on them after they entered into an alliance with the colonial Americans. And to answer the question of what practical impact did this military aid have, um, for the Americans, I mean, it was crucial to them winning to the war. What it did was it diverted troops away from the North American mainland to the West Indies, to Europe, because this became a world war essentially when Britain declared war on France. And Britain, especially, they put a priority on sending troops to the West Indies because that's where their most lucrative economic assets were, and to Europe. They were concerned about a French invasion. They wanted to crush the French in Europe. So that was more important to them than what was going on in the North American colonies. So troops were not being, so this basically tied out all these troops that could have been sent to North America to crush the Americans through sheer weight of regular troops numbers. The militia probably would not have been able to stand up to just thousands and thousands of incoming British regulars. Um, and in addition, the British troops that were in North America, it siphoned them out, like I said, to the European theater, but more often, or and than not, to the West Indies. And David Ramsey, in his book Life of George Washington, talks about how, along with this, the ability of the French to obtain mastery over the North American East Coast in the form of naval blockades pinned down the British, and the Americans toward the end of the war putting a lot of their pinning the hopes of them winning the war on a successful French naval blockades. That way, they're able to fight the British without them being able to either flee, on a on without them being able to flee, you know, un advantageous, military positions or receive reinforcements. So we see the importance there. And Charles Royster, in his book Revolutionary People at War, talks about how in the late 1770s and 1780, 1781, the Americans had a morale crisis. Inflation was rampant. The soldiers weren't getting paid. The Continental Congress was dithering and was not able to collaborate effectively with the military and other civil authorities to even send basic supplies, food, ammunition to the Americans. So the American soldiers were at quite a crisis point, even with the aid of the French. So without the aid of the French naval blockade, without them siphoning off thousands of troops, British regulars, to Europe and to the Caribbean, I think odds are the American Revolution would have not gone the way it did in favor of the Patriots. Now, that's not to say that it could not have been won without the Patriots by the French aid, but I think that if we're just being logical, we look at the facts on the ground. French involvement in the American Revolution was one of the biggest factors, not the only, but the big one of the biggest factors in the Americans winning the war for independence. And if the let's say if the French hadn't been involved, the Americans still could have won, possibly. However, that would have probably taken at least another couple years of protracted warfare, and it probably would have involved a situation where they fought the British to kind of a standstill so the British negotiated peace, or the British would have won most major victories, but a continued insurgency, guerrilla warfare might have eventually forced the British to leave. So, yeah, that's what I have for y'all today, and I hope y'all enjoyed it.